Hi everyone. Now the next theory that we have to study in this essay is structuralism. I hope you know structuralism, which is based on the principles of language and how the structures, different structures, we can actually find structures in all these social practices. So there is no human agency in structuralism. Structuralism is anti-human, I can say. Cultural studies, on the other hand, which is the exact opposite of structuralism, cultural studies finds human agents in the formation of social practices. It always tries to find meaning in the human practices. So I have given a picture here to understand the procedure of structuralism and culturalism. See, for example, the picture shows like this. Structuralism starts with the culture, then it goes to popular culture, capitalism, everything, then it has an impact on society. So structuralism believes that the structure is the one that impacts, that has impact on us. Just because, see, I told you that okay, base superstructure example you remember. Now imagine that just because, see, cultural studies believes that, just like Marxism believes that it is us, we decide the base, we decide the culture, it is based on our identity or subjectification. The whole culture is based on everything. So whatever, if we basically change, naturally it will affect in the culture as well. The popular culture, for example, if all women audience are they are deciding that they have, if they decide that we don't want the melodramatic TV serials anymore, then the whole TV, Indian TV mini serial, the TV serial, that phenomenon will be over, and they'll come up with something new that we want. So what majority audience want, and they will cater to the majority. So this is what cultural studies believes. But structuralism believes exactly the opposite. They say that it is because the TV culture gives us this serial, this TV serial. It's an example, okay. We are forced to or asked to take in all this. So we are very passive. The audience, the viewers are very passive here according to structuralism. You get the difference now. I'll read out the notes here and then you will understand. Structuralism and culturalism are contrasting ideas. Culturalism takes meaning to be its central category and casts it as the product of active human agents. Structuralism, on the other hand, speaks of signifying practices that generate meaning as an outcome of structures or predictable regularities that lie outside of any given person. In other words, we can say that structuralism is anti-humanist in nature. By decentralizing human agency, it only analyzes phenomena in relation to other phenomena, but never in relation to human as source of meaning. So this is what you should understand about structuralism and cultural studies going on. As given in the figure I mentioned here, structuralism is into a top-down approach. See, from believing that culture, the popular culture and agents of capitalism control the society. That is what structuralism believes. Which is we, the society, that is us, right? We are helplessly tied to the control of these structures. So structures are controlling us, structures are the hierarchy. This is what structuralism believes. Now culturalism believes that it is a society and their signifying practices which decide what is culture and what is other structures. So structuralism believes that it is us who decide the culture. So we have the power. So there is a human agency. Cultural studies recognizes the human agency in the formation of culture. Basically, we are the key element in making the culture. That's what cultural studies believes. Now, structuralism understands culture as it understands language. I know that structuralism, I hope you know that structuralism applies the same principle as it applies in language in creating meaning. So yeah, it is the rules and conventions present in the lang that generate meaning and not the specific usages in an individual, that is a parole. So lang and parole, I hope you know the definitions of lang and parole. Lang is a general language, rules and regulations. Parole is what you speak, the individual variety. So structuralism believes that it is the lang, the main rules and regulations that decide what should be the rules and regulations in the parole. Now, cultural studies believes that it is a parole which decides what should be there in lang. So, structuralism also analyzes binaries in order to understand meaning. This also we are familiar with, because structuralism believes that, for example, this is, what color is this? This is black. Now, structuralism says that you can't say it simply this is a black pen, because you have to consider other why it is black. If somebody asks you that question, then you have to go to structuralism, because I can say it is not white, it's not red, it's not green, it's not blue. So I said black pen, right? So I can also say it's not a knife, it's not a pencil, it's not a human being, everything. So there is this collision of all these opposites, these binaries that come in, and in this procedure the object, that is this pen, this black pen, it is getting defined. So that is structuralism. Now what did Derrida say about post-structuralism? He says that when you try to define this pen, when you try that it is not white, it's not blue, it's not green, the meaning is not getting focused. We are not trying to define this is a black pen. We are not trying to decide that this is a black pen. Derrida says that the meaning keeps on changing and it keeps on differing. So there is a difference and deference. So it's a bit complicated concept to understand, and I told you even before in the class, trying to understand Derrida is like, I don't know, trying to drink up the whole ocean. So it's a bit complicated, but I don't pretend to know Derrida. All I can tell you is what I read about Derrida from the secondary materials that are available in English language. So let's hope that it makes sense about Derrida, I told you. But anyway, post-structuralism is only next. I was just talking about structuralism. Let's get back on. An example is given, Levi-Strauss example. He uses the idea of food to describe how culture decides what is edible and inedible. The perfect example, I would say, regarding structuralism and its preference on the structures, and why cultural studies believes that it is not the culture which decides the society, it is a society or the human agents. We are the ones who are deciding culture. We are going to that example. So Levi-Strauss example says that he talks about this Jewish idea of food. Jews believe that, okay, a particular, if for a Jew to decide a particular item is food, then first he has to be sure that it is kosher. Kosher food is the only food. So it doesn't matter whether it is edible or not, it has to be kosher. Only then they will accept it as food. So Levi-Strauss brings this idea saying that it is the culture, Jewish culture, which decides what is food. Get me? Or for other communities other than Jews and Islam and some other communities who have these particularities with the food, for them what decides food is whether it is cooked or not. Most of us, these people, because the cooking is the cultural procedure which has this decisive power over this concept deciding what is food. Now for others, now raw food also sometimes we eat, carrots. Sometimes, yeah, we know that it doesn't have to be cooked, but it doesn't see basically to decide an item. Even now, if may I ask that we are Indians, South Indians, okay, for us, I told you that other than Jews and Islam, maybe cooking is the one which decides whether it is a food or not. So if I cook a worm, if I cook an earthworm or something that is disgusting according to our notions to eat, if I cook that and give you, Will you call it food? No. See, so cooking does not decide whether something is food or not, but we are talking about the structure and how structure decides a particular item, decides its identity. So this is what we are talking about as an example. In fact, you can use this example in your exam as well. So the nutritional element has nothing to do with the idea of food. So if you go to northeast of our country, the idea of food for them, it's a bit different. So we may not like that, or they may not like our food. They may call it very oily, too much masala. Or if you go to South Asian countries, the idea of food, almost they eat pure protein by eating these worms and this bit of beetles. So for them that is food. And we can't even think of food when you think of worms, but for them it is delicious food. So it is a culture which decides what is to be called food. So now you know that how structure has a decisive power over our practices. So cultural studies believes exactly the opposite. It is the human preferences that later become practices and that gradually becomes culture. So this is a difference between structuralism and cultural studies. Now discussing post-structuralism and cultural studies. First we have to discuss post-structuralism, then we have to discuss what is called discourse by Foucault, Michel Foucault, and then we will come to a comparison or finding similarities with these theories with cultural studies. Now post-structuralism, I told you, I gave the example of the pen and how meaning keeps changing, difference, everything we discussed. I'll just read it and it's very short here. Post-structuralism doesn't believe in strict structural construct of the world or in binaries. That is one difference it has with structuralism. It is either black or white is not acceptable for a post-structuralism. See, for structuralism, this pen has to be black or something other that is not black. So it is clear cut. It believes in binaries. But for post-structuralism, it can be grey as well. We use this as an idiom also, right? There can be grey areas as well. The meaning keeps shifting for a post-structuralist. Meaning cannot be confined to single words, sentences or particular text, but it is the outcome of relationship between the text, that is intertextuality. Post-structuralism is also anti-humanist. It does not believe in human agency in creating meanings. Meaning is always deferred and in process. In other way, according to Derrida, there is nothing outside the text. When you say nothing outside the text, it doesn't mean that there is no world outside the text. No, it means the meaning in a text is constitutive of the practices. That means when I say there is nothing outside this pen, it doesn't mean that there are no other world, there are no other objects around the pen. Whatever this is, to define what is this is included in this itself. I am not talking about the ink that is inside the pen. I am talking about what defines this pen. How can we define this pen? I told you. We can say that it's not a knife, it's not a table, it's not a purse. Everything we can talk about. So by that, using only the elements that can be a part of this, we can decide what is this. I told you it's a bit complicated concept to understand. The best method to understand post-structuralism or Derrida is to read by yourself, because when you listen to others' explanation, what happens is that it keeps changing and it keeps confusing you. I am talking about my experience here. The best way is always at least read the English articles on Derrida and the good articles. You can read Habib, then try to get a meaning and try to get your own understanding. That is always best, because I think it is impossible for anyone to completely understand what is post-structuralism. Even if you understand it, even if you get it, it's very difficult, at least for me, to present it, to communicate with others. And when you read it, you will also, I hope you will also face the same situation. So that's all about post-structuralism. and we'll talk about discourse, and then we'll come to cultural studies and its difference with these two ideas. So Michel Foucault's idea of discourse. Discourse is, if you are looking in the dictionary, discourse is very simply defined there, but discourse is, it's a bit, it's very easy if I give you an example, but let me read the definitions here, the notes here, and then we'll come to the example. Foucault and discourse. Discursive practices. Whatever practices are there in discourse, they are called discursive practices, developed by Foucault, refers to the practices or operations of discourse, meaning knowledge formations, not to linguistic practices or language use. The focus is on how knowledge is produced through plural and contingent practices across different sites. Meaning only comes through discourse. Discourse here means object and practices. I'll tell you what is an object and I'll tell you what are practices. And discourse produces knowledge. For example, now you're walking through a street and you see this round shaped object and you kick it. Can you call it a football? Or can you at least talk about this situation in terms of football? Or can you at least tell your friends, oh, I gave a kick, it was a goal? No. But the same action, the same practice, when you do it in a stadium full of people watching you, cheering you, and you're kicking that spherical object is actually a football, and you kick that wearing a jersey, the number on it, name on it, and you're part of a team, then that becomes football. Now, another example. So, going back to the first example. So, kicking this ball, when you do that in a street, it doesn't have any other practices to support it, to make it part of a discourse of football. But when you do the same action with the same spherical object in a stadium full of people, then it becomes part of this discourse called football. Discourse can be anything. Hairstyle can be a discourse. So anything and everything you can talk about hairstyle is becoming part of discourse. Another example is this. A person in a doctor's room, in a mental clinic, talking about his existential crisis, blabbering things about our existence, the world, some, nonsense. Now that is something. Now imagine the same blabberings is done by an academic, in an auditorium. He's standing on a podium with a mic in his hand, or people watching, and he's in his nicest dress, and he does this as a speech addressing these people, but the same content. That can be called as a breakthrough in some philosophy. Now, why is that the same content spoken in a doctor's room, or the same content spoken in an auditorium full of scholars and students, why is that the second one is more appropriate or more part of the academics, and the first one is part of the diagnosis procedure, the mental hospital, and it only becomes consultation. So this is my example. So the first one, the example about the kicking the ball, the spherical object. The second one is talking about existential crisis, sharing with the doctor. Then it becomes the part of a diagnosis, while the second one part of academics. Now, who decides who is the perfect person to speak about this particular thing? Even though the content is the same, the people who are talking, the people who are saying it, they are two different people. The first one is a mental patient, psychiatric patient. The second one is a professor. So imagine if both are the same person. In the first situation, he is a patient because he is inside the discourse of psychiatrics, all that is there in mental disorder. And if he is there in the auditorium talking to scholars and students, he is the academic, he is a professor, he is part of that discourse. So discourse decides who can speak, when can we speak, or what do we speak about something. anything and everything that I talk about a particular object, or anything and everything you can even think of a particular object, becomes part of the discourse of that object. This is in short what is called discourse.